Draco Malfoy and the Journal of Dreadful Things. Written by Little Beans 19. Read for you by Gemini Wishes. Part 1 of the Journal of Dreadful Things series. Summary. Draco Malfoy's fate is changed when his future self rather rudely drops in and burdens him with the task of changing the course of time to save himself and the future of the Wixen world. With only an enchanted old journal and his outstanding wit in hand, Draco must do all that he can to change his fate, all the while failing miserably to not fall in love with a certain scar-headed someone. This is a Harry Potter fanfiction containing the relationship of Draco Malfoy and Harry Potter. This fic is rated G, and no archive warnings apply. Chapter 1. A Warning from Oneself. Malfoy Manor, Wednesday the 31st of July 1991. It was a beautiful morning in Wiltshire. Truly. The sun rose steadily into the clear blue sky, the birds sang a pretty song, the peacocks sang a not quite so pretty one, and the colorful flowers in the manor's garden bloomed with the summer heat. A truly perfect day. And what was so exciting about this particular day that found Draco Malfoy grinning from ear to ear as he dutifully slicked his hair back? Well, today he would be getting his first wand. It was a very big deal to him, for he would soon be attending Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry come September. His mother and father would be taking him to buy his school equipment today, and he was more than thrilled. And since they were going to Diagon Alley, he hoped he might even manage to wheedle his father into buying him a new broomstick. The Nimbus 2000 was all the rage at the moment, and he was just dying to even see one. He was so wrapped up in his daydreaming that he didn't notice the strange, buzzing, whirring noise until, without warning, a blindingly bright white light filled the room, followed by a thunderous crack. Before he knew it, Draco had tumbled off his chair and down to the floor, left to gawk in astonishment at the heap of black material that had rather dramatically appeared in the very middle of his room. The heap emitted a deep groan, and then, Merlin forbid, it began to move. Draco's breath caught in fright. He scrambled back until he collided with the wall as the heap grew taller and taller, until it was revealed to be a figure shrouded in a hooded cloak. Draco let out an undignified squeak, immediately regretting it as the figure swiveled around to face him. "Oh, Merlin," the cloaked figure said, reaching for their hood. "I actually did it." The stranger's hood came down, revealing a weirdly familiar man, pale and raggedy with blonde hair, stood staring in shock at Draco. "I actually managed to do it." Draco gaped at the man, then did the only rational thing, began screaming at the top of his lungs. The man cursed and immediately darted forwards, clasping a bony hand to Draco's mouth, glaring at Draco with familiar gray eyes. "Shh, please listen," he hissed desperately. "I need you to listen to me, Draco. Draco wrenched the hand away from his face with all his might. "How do you know my name?" he wailed. "I really need you to calm down. I'm not going to hurt you. I really don't have much time," the man pleaded, pulling out a gold chain from within his cloak. Attached to it was a tiny spherical hourglass, a time turner. Draco had only ever seen illustrations in books, but this one looked weird. It had a lot of extra bits and crazy spiraling coils of metal. And so, despite himself, Draco clamped his jaw shut and looked on at the wizard with wide, curious eyes. "Thank you," the man sighed, relief clear in his eyes. "Now, I really need you to listen to me. Can you do that?" Draco nodded slowly. The man took a shaky breath, looking at Draco with a strange glint in his eye. "My name is Draco Lucius Malfoy," he said slowly. "I'm from several years in the future. I am you." Draco felt his eyebrows climb upwards. "I know you won't believe it," the supposed future Draco said, raising his hands. "But look at me, and I mean really look at me. I am you." Draco looked. He saw a thin, pale, pointed face just like his own, a mess of ratty white blonde hair, 2 eyes, dull and tired, but gray and so very familiar to him. He saw a man who looked remarkably like his father, a man who looked like him. "You're really me?" Draco breathed in wonderment. Yes, I am." Future Draco shot to his feet, nodding with a crazed smile. But you look like a tramp. Future Draco made a sound much like a choking Kneasel. Excuse me? He snapped. I only just recently got out of Azkaban. I get sent to Azkaban? Yes, the man snapped, and that's why I'm here. Oh my, Draco squeaked. My past, your future. It is not good, Future Draco said grimly, his expression darkening. The Dark Lord comes back. There's a second Wizarding War. The Dark Lord's side loses. Harry Potter defeats him. We were on the Dark Lord's side, but we didn't want it as much as you think we do. The Dark Lord is not at all what Father makes him out to be. We were forced to do things we really didn't want to do. The man paused in his ramblings to pull up the left sleeve of his raggedy robes, revealing a mass of dark, inky lines, stark against his pale skin, resembling a menacing skull and snake. The Dark Mark, Future Draco explained. It's what got us thrown into Azkaban in the first place. Draco, struggling to keep up with all this information, stared at the mark with wide eyes, noting that it was just like the one on his father's arm. Draco, nothing is how we wanted it to be. It wasn't what we were raised to believe, Future Draco emphasized, eyes pleading, mouth a grim line. You need to change our fate. The boy's gaze snapped back up to the man's. What? How am I supposed to— Today is the 31st of July, 1991, yes? Future Draco asked, reaching inside his cloak. Draco nodded, frowning. Today is the day you meet Harry Potter. I do? Draco gasped, delighted. Future Draco paused in his actions, his face scrunched into a sneer. Yes, he said. You meet him when you get your robes fitted at Madame Malkin's. You don't make a good first impression, clearly. Why ever not? Draco pouted. What's not to like about me? I know, right? Future Draco threw his arms up, then sniffed, affronted. Apparently, I wasn't good enough for Potter. Admittedly, I did insult both him and his friends for years, but Potter refused my offer of friendship, so I personally did everything I could to make his life miserable. That's fair, Draco agreed, shrugging. Yes, well, anyway, I wasn't good enough. But you could be, Future Draco said, finally pulling something from his cloak. It was a small, tattered, black book. He presented it to Draco, grinning like a lunatic. A book, Draco said flatly. Not just any book, Future Draco breathed. I spent my sentence in Azkaban thinking every single day about every single thing that went wrong, and how I could have handled things differently. I wrote everything I could down in here. He held the book up with shaking hands. This book contains the knowledge of both yours and the Wixen world's future. A journal of dreadful things, so to speak. With it, I believe you can prevent at least some of these things from happening. At least I hope so. I'm not really sure if that's possible, or if we're brave enough. Draco looked at the book, then up at the clearly deranged, raggedy man who claimed to be him, then down at the book again. You're what I become if I do everything inside of this book? Unfortunately, Future Draco sighed. Look, everything went wrong because we were wrong about everything. I believe our choices could change a lot of things, he said before glancing at his time turner, which had begun to faintly glow. He clucked his tongue and firmly pressed the book into Draco's hands. Take this. Befriend Harry Potter. Try to be nice. You cannot breathe a word of this to Mother and Father. Try not to follow Father's footsteps this time, and remember to— But Draco never got to hear the rest of that sentence, as another loud crack sounded, and the room was swallowed by white light. And just like that, Future Draco was gone. Draco stared, speechless, at the space where he'd been for quite a long time, his mind doing cartwheels until there came a brisk knock at the door. He forcefully gathered his thoughts, blinking furiously. Yes? He finally managed to squeak out. Dobby is being here to tell the young master that breakfast is served and his presence is being requested, came the even squeakier response. Draco looked down at the worn book in his hands, a rush of something tingling at his fingertips. I'll be right down, he croaked, vaguely wondering how on earth his parents hadn't heard a peep of all the commotion. Diagon Alley, Wednesday the 31st of July, 1991. Hours later, as Draco stepped into a lively, bustling Diagon Alley with his parents, he still couldn't quite wrap his head around the bizarre events of his morning. It felt like some sort of feverish dream, but the shabby book in his bedside table told him otherwise. His future self had been so desperate as to travel in time to warn him. He stared blankly at a mannequin in a window displaying dress robes. Future Draco had said he'd meet Harry Potter when he got his robes fitted, and to not mess it up. To be nice. To change his fate. Draco scoffed. He had no idea just how he was going to go about doing any of that exactly. He hadn't had any time to read that journal. However, he thought he'd very much like to avoid any future in which he ended up looking like such a haggard old tramp. Right. Draco's father barked as they traversed down the alley. What comes first? He asked, slanting Draco a look. Shall we take a look at that list? Draco reached into his robes and retrieved his Hogwarts list, quickly reading it again. Could we perhaps get all the boring things sorted first? He quipped as he passed the list to his father. Draco, his mother tutted, swiftly plucking the list from his father's fingers before the patriarch could so much as glance at it. There's nothing boring about spellbooks and cauldrons, now is there? She pursed her lips as her eyes traveled down the page. Although I do suppose we could get all of this boring potions equipment out of the way first. To the nearest, most boring apothecary, then? His father drawled, taking the parchment back and tucking it neatly into his pockets. His mother hummed in thought, whilst Draco huffed. He enjoyed learning about potions the most in his tutoring, and they knew it. Oh, relax, darling, his mother tittered. Although I had actually thought you might get your robes fitted first, as that gives your father and I time to sort some other things out. Isn't that right, dear? She said with a sharp, pointed look at his father. Other things? Draco echoed. His parents exchanged a meaningful look. Other business we need to attend to, son. It shouldn't take very long at all, his father told him smoothly. In fact, by the time you've finished with your robes, I shall be waiting for you at Ollivander's, for your wand, his mother added. And I shall be collecting your books for you. His father inclined his head, leaning primly against his cane. Draco nodded in a sudden understanding. They meant they had to nip down to Nocturne Alley quickly to run some errands. All right, he sighed. I shall go fetch my robes first. I've booked you in at Madame Malkin's, dear, his mother said, gesturing to the sign just up the street. You'll need to be fitted for your seasonal dress robes as well. Draco perked up at that. He did enjoy it when he got new dress robes. As he stepped inside Madame Malkin's, the words of future Draco came back to him to haunt him again. If he was telling him the truth, then Draco was about to meet the Harry Potter. But the shop appeared to be empty, save for one of the other seamstresses pottering about in the back. Draco sighed deeply and approached the empty front desk, lazily ringing the bell. A very hassled, pink-in-the-cheeks Madame Malkin rushed in from another room, wrestling large rolls of black fabric under her arms. Ah, our favorite customer. Hogwarts, I'll take it, Mr. Malfoy, she huffed, smiling politely. Draco nodded primly. Yes, we've been busy today, the squat witch interrupted hurriedly, chuckling. Glenda will see to you. She gestured to the tall witch in question, who promptly shuffled Draco to the back of the shop and set him up on a footstool. Draco couldn't help but frown at the poor customer treatment. I've a booked fitting for dress robes as well, you know, he said importantly. The witch, Greta, only nodded in acknowledgement as she began taking his measurements. Under the name Malfoy, he added, sniffing. All right, dear, we'll get that sorted, the witch replied, slipping a long robe over his head. Draco pouted as she set about pinning the fabric, glaring at his reflection in the mirror. Over his shoulder, he caught sight of a ragamuffin of a boy fidgeting outside the shop window and scoffed loudly to himself. The boy's dark hair was an atrocity, and his grubby Muggle clothes were much too large and baggy for him. But then, the boy was shuffling nervously inside the shop, glancing warily about from behind battered, round spectacles, and an outrageous thought crossed Draco's mind. Could this be Harry Potter? There was some murmuring from the front of the shop as Madame Malkin saw to the boy. She wasted no time hurrying him up on the footstool next to Draco, flinging a robe over his messy black mop and furiously pinning with precision. Draco slanted the boy who was possibly Harry Potter a dubious look to find he was already looking back at Draco with curious green eyes that widened upon noticing he'd been caught. Draco chanced a glance at the boy's forehead for that famous scar, only finding messy black curls of hair in the way. The boy fidgeted, lifting a hand to his hair and awkwardly trying to smooth it down. This only made his hair spring back even messier, like it was determined to be a disaster, as well as revealing a scar in the shape of a bolt of lightning. "Oh, you are Harry Potter," Draco grimaced. The boy, who was most definitely Harry Potter, made a weird noise as both Madame Malkin and Gretel gasped loudly, pausing in their work to share an excited look. "I am," he replied, looking down at his weird muggle shoes. Draco hummed. He wasn't exactly the dashing boy hero he'd expected to see. He was all scrawny and awkward and poor-looking, and his clothes were beyond strange. "Malfoy," Draco marched on anyway. "Draco Malfoy." Harry Potter only blinked at him owlishly, saying nothing. "And I'll be starting at Hogwarts too," Draco added. Recognition flickered in Harry Potter's face, and he nodded. "Oh, okay. That's cool. Me too," was all he said. "Well, obviously," Draco scoffed. "Everyone who's anyone in the Wixen world knows that, Harry Potter. Harry, would you mind terribly if I called you Harry?" Harry only shrugged. He had a tight, uncomfortable look marring his features. Perhaps Madame Malkin had pricked him with a pin. "Yes, well, basically everyone who's anyone knows you were on the list." Draco smirked, preening at his reflection. By Merlin, he even made school robes look good. "You have an idea of which house you'll be in yet?" he carried on cordially. At Harry's baffled expression, he continued. "I mean, I suppose nobody really actually knows until they get there, do they? But I know I'll be in Slytherin. All of my family has been. Imagine being sorted into Hufflepuff," Draco snorted. "I think I'd leave, wouldn't you?" Ravenclaw would be all right, I suppose. But Gryffindor, my father says they're a bunch of reckless fools." At the other boy's vague hum of agreement, Draco looked over at him, his smile somewhat falling. Green eyes were staring lazily at the mirror, filled with something suspiciously like boredom. "Well, anyway, who cares about the stupid houses? Aren't you excited?" Draco asked. Harry's face lit up. "I am, actually, yeah," he said with a small smile. "You?" "Well, of course," Draco rolled his eyes. "From everything I've heard, it sounds fantastic. I suppose the only downside is first years not being allowed on the Quidditch team. Both my father and I agree that it's a heinous crime. But I'm considering persuading my father to buy me a broom so I can smuggle it in anyway," he smirked. He planned to dazzle the captain of the Slytherin team with his skill, showing them all how marvelous and talented he was so they simply had to let him on the team. The bored expression was back. Draco huffed again. He was glaring at his reflection once more when he caught sight of the largest man he'd ever seen in his entire life, grinning and waggling about 2 cones of ice cream outside the shop window like a loon. "I say, look at that man," he exclaimed. "That's Hagrid," Harry said, already beaming back at the giant man. "He works at Hogwarts." "Oh," Draco nodded. "Yes, I've heard of him. He's a sort of servant, isn't he?" Harry's smile fell. "He's the gamekeeper," he said, frowning. "Yes, exactly," Draco snickered, remembering what his father had told him. "I hear he's a wild savage, lives in a hut in the school grounds, and—" Harry was glaring at him. Draco coughed awkwardly. "Well, I take it that you're with him?" "Yes. He's taking me to buy my school things," Harry replied, eyeing Draco rather coldly. "And I think he's brilliant." "Oh, well, how nice for you," Draco trod lightly. "That's what I'm here for as well. My school things, I mean." There was uncomfortably heavy silence in the shop until Madame Malkin gently cleared her throat. "That's you done, my dear," she said, pulling the robes off Harry Potter and bustling away to wrap them up. The dark-haired boy hopped down from his footstool. "I'll see you at Hogwarts, then?" Draco called out as Harry made his way to the front of the shop. Harry turned to look at him with something one could mistake for scorn, before quickly paying and leaving. Draco nodded slowly to himself as the shop door swung shut. "I think that went rather well." Gretchen shot him the strangest look. Malfoy Manor, Wednesday the 31st of July, 1991. Still. Draco yawned, stretching as he flopped onto his bed. The day was finally over, and what a day it had been. He held his wand up, smiling. He hadn't put it down since he'd got it. It was 10 inches, fashioned from a beautiful branch of dark, sleek hawthorn with a unicorn hair core. The wrinkly old wizard had pulled the oddest of faces when it chose Draco. "A peculiar fit," he had rasped. "A hawthorn wand is tricky by nature, finicky. It would take a very talented wizard or witch to master it, and oftentimes the wielder faces difficult choices, inner turmoil, a conflicted mind. But a unicorn hair core. Oh my, yes, this is a very powerful wand indeed." But Draco had barely registered any of that. He'd only really listened to the parts about him being talented and powerful. Draco placed his wand neatly on his bedside table, admiring it once more before reaching out to put out his floating bedside candles. And then his eyes fell on the little black book. He'd almost forgotten about all of that. It had been a very eventful day, after all. He'd gotten swept up with the excitement of meeting Harry Potter and buying all his things, especially his wand and his potions equipment. His mind falling away from the fateful meeting with his future self and this book. Draco carefully picked it up. It really was a sad little thing. The faded leather cover looked more purplish-gray than black, covered in tiny scratches and blotches of dried ink. The pages were crisp and yellowing, and there was a large inky stain completely covering the top corner, cover and all. What had future Draco called it? A journal of dreadful happenings? Draco examined it closer, squinting. This shabby little thing really held the knowledge of the future? Draco knew he wouldn't lie to himself, most of the time. But no, this was different, because this was traveling in time and changing fate and all those other dramatic things he only read about in epic tales. This was a personal request to see that he won't make the same mistakes twice. So Draco opened the book and began to read. King's Cross Station, Sunday the 1st of September, 1991. "Now, are you absolutely certain you have everything?" Draco's mother fretted as all 3 Malfoys weaved through the heaving crowd gathered at platform 9 3/4. "All of your books? Every single one? Your wand?" She narrowed her eyes in thought. "Your hat?" Draco smirked his best smirk as they came to a stop before the Hogwarts Express. "Mother, you know I have everything," he told her. "Even my hat." His mother sighed, brushing an imaginary bit of dust from Draco's shoulder. "I know." "Draco," came his father's voice for the first time since they'd arrived at the train station. He leaned both hands upon his cane with an air of importance. Draco braced himself for the coming lecture about holding up the family name, maintaining a good reputation, and following the expectations. "Remember to have fun," was what his father said instead, smirking lightly. Draco gawped for the briefest of moments, then broke into a huge grin. "I mean it." His father inclined his head. "Some of the best years of your life are about to begin." Draco's grin grew impossibly wider. "I will," he nodded. "Thank you, father." "But do keep up with your studies as well. I still expect top marks from you, and you would do well to remember—" "Oh, look, darling, there are the crabs," his mother suddenly spoke, effectively distracting Draco's father as she gestured to the orange-robed family in question. "Draco, why don't you find a compartment with little Vincent?" And so 20 minutes later found Draco tucked into a compartment with Vincent Crabbe and Gregory Goyle as the Hogwarts Express left King's Cross Station. The 2 boys were guaranteed to be Slytherins, just as Draco was sure he would be in Slytherin too. "How long do you think we'll be on the train for, Draco?" Vincent asked as he gaped open-mouthed out the window at the many houses and strange, tall glass structures of Muggle London. "Well, I know Hogwarts is located in Scotland," Draco replied, "so I'd say a fair few hours." "Wow," Gregory breathed. "Scotland? Isn't that millions of miles away?" Vincent frowned suddenly. I hope they serve food on the train. Of course you do, Draco sighed, rolling his eyes. He had known these two idiots for most of his life. Their families were always attending the same galas and functions that Draco's did, and their parents were friends with his, which meant Draco often got lumped in together with them. Gregory was as thick as a brick wall, and Vincent was as greedy as a pig, but they made for good company, and they had always been strangely loyal to him. There was a sudden uproar of hooting and shouting outside the compartment. Draco opened the door, peeking out curiously. "That's right, you heard it here first, folks," a ginger-haired boy was exclaiming loudly, hands cupped over his mouth. "Harry Potter is on the train. The boy who lived is coming to Hogwarts," another ginger boy who looked exactly the same as the first hollered. Draco thought they must be twins, and Weasleys by the looks of their robes. "Yeah, right, pull the other one," a tough-looking girl yelled, having also peeked out of her compartment to see what all the fuss was about. "Angelina," one of the twins gasped, clutching at his chest. "Would we ever lie to you?" Draco quietly closed the door. "Do you reckon that's true, Draco?" Greg asked, eyes wide as quaffles. "Who knows?" Draco said airily. He fell back into his seat, smirking as he watched Muggle London turn into the fields of the English countryside. He liked to think he had some form of a plan. It was rather good, actually. See, there was something off about the journal, a confusing feeling that Draco couldn't quite put into words. His stomach felt queasy and his fingers trembled as he'd read through it. It was heavy with a numbness that had made his chest ache and his eyes well up for no reason in particular. Something had told him that this was how his future self felt. Draco did not want to feel like that if he could help it. So he was going to wait to meet Harry Potter on the train today and befriend him properly this time, just like he'd been asked to. It wasn't something he was exactly complaining about, to be friends with the Harry Potter. Besides, he felt he'd already made quite a good impression on the boy who lived at Madame Malkin's. Yes, Draco nodded to himself. This was going to be very easy indeed. Lunchtime came and went without a sign of Harry Potter. Draco had forgotten just how boring conversations with Vincent Crabbe and Gregory Goyle could be. They talked about the most ridiculous topics and seemed to find the stupidest things funny. Draco was so entirely fed up after an hour of talking about Vincent's odd sock collection, he found himself itching to flick through the journal once more. He was just about to reach up and get it when there came a knock at the compartment door. Draco instantly sprung to his feet, a thrill rushing through him. Surely this would be Harry Potter. Just as the journal had said, "You'll meet Harry Potter once more on the train upon the first day of the 9th month, blah, 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 don't offer a handshake or something or rather." Too eager to remember, he flung open the door to find a surprised-looking dark-skinned girl with a wildly untamed mane of hair, and none other than Neville Longbottom, both wearing blank first-year robes. Draco forced himself to conceal his disappointment. Longbottom recognized Draco, Vincent, and Gregory immediately, his eyes widening in fear.
Sorry to interrupt," the girl began, "but you wouldn't have happened to have seen a toad about, would you? Neville here's lost his."
Vincent and Gregory shook their heads, utterly gormless. "No, we haven't," Draco replied shortly, then wondered why on earth anyone would want a pet toad. They were all slimy and disgusting, and didn't they go out of style decades ago? He supposed it made sense for Longbottom to own such a pathetic pet.
"Oh, well, don't worry, Neville," the girl said reassuringly. "We'll find Trevor eventually."
Longbottom managed a weak smile. "Unless he's managed to hop out the window or something," Vincent chuckled. Longbottom's face fell, horrified. Draco managed to snuff his laughter, clearing his throat as a cover-up.
"We'd best go carry on searching,"
the girl said shrewdly, fixing them all with a hard stare before flouncing out of the compartment with Neville trudging after her. Draco fell back into his seat with a huff. Still no sign of Harry Potter. Maybe Draco should stop waiting and just go find him. Draco shot back to his feet, startling Vincent. Of course! That's exactly what he was going to do. Why hadn't he thought of that sooner? "I'm going to stretch my legs," he announced, rushing out of the compartment before Gregory or Vincent could utter a word. When Draco finally found the right compartment, the sky outside had become a light purplish color and warm yellow lights had lit up the train. Vincent and Gregory were probably wondering where he was. but he'd finally found the mop of dark, messy hair. Only it was accompanied by a very telling head of ginger hair. Draco opened the door, blinking as he took in the sight that met him. Harry Potter sat with what could only be another Weasley, the Weasley mentioned in the journal, surrounded by sweet wrappers, neither of them wearing their school robes yet. Recognition immediately glinted in Potter's eyes as he stared at Draco. The Weasley boy blinked curiously back at him, a cauldron cake halfway to his rather ginormous gob. "Hello again," Draco began as politely as possible. "People were saying all down the train that you were in this compartment, and you are." Yeah," Potter said, his mouth doing an awkward grimace thing. The Weasley looked at Potter. "I thought you said you didn't know anybody from Hogwarts." "Well, I don't, not really," Potter shook his head. "I met, Draco," Draco supplied politely. He could have sniped, told them that Draco was a very elegant Wixen-style name, but he held his tongue. "Right, I met Draco when I got my school robes," Potter shrugged. "You two should probably be in them now, by the way," Draco said airily as he examined the mountain of sweet wrappers. "Robes, that is." "Oh." Weasley looked out the window. "Merlin, it did get dark quickly. I'm Ron Weasley, by the way." Draco felt his lip quiver as he felt compelled to sneer just as his father did whenever the Weasley name was mentioned. "A pleasure," he managed, then turned quickly to Harry Potter and gestured to the seat beside him. "Do you mind?" Potter, who had been frowning out the window, looked taken aback. No." Draco ignored the lack of enthusiasm in his voice and began sweeping chocolate frog boxes to the side. "So, my fine fellows," Draco began, "how are we feeling about— Oh, ow!" Draco yelped out in pain. There was a sharp stabbing sensation in his finger. He tugged his hand out of the pile to find a rat. A filthy, fat rat dangled from his hand, its sharp yellow teeth digging into his finger. "Get it off! Get it off! Get it off!" Draco howled, ignoring the other boys' yells, all the while panicking and spinning around in a mad attempt to remove the foul creature. Eventually, after much arm flailing, the mangy thing finally let go. It went soaring across the compartment, smacking into the window and leaving a greasy smear as it slid down the glass. Draco, slightly out of breath, clutched his throbbing, bleeding finger to his chest, quite dizzy and rather unsure how to act. There was a moment of complete silence as the three boys simply stared at the rat. Then it fell to the floor with an anticlimactic flump, and Weasley scrambled out of his seat. "Scabbers!" he exclaimed, crouching down and picking the disgusting thing up by its wormy tail. "Is he all right?" Potter asked, blinking in shock. Draco's mouth fell wide open. He felt rage bubbling in him like a potion gone wrong. He had just been attacked, and they were more concerned about the vicious little beast than him? He was about to give them a piece of his mind when the compartment door was flung wide open. "What has been going on?" It was that bushy-haired girl again, looking wildly about the compartment. "I think he's been knocked out," Weasley offhandedly told Potter, paying the girl no mind. She frowned at them, then turned to Draco, nose wrinkling when she saw his hand. "Did you get bitten by that rat?" she asked. "You know, you could get an infection if you don't clean it out right away. And you two should be in your robes by now," she told Potter and Weasley. "The conductor says we're almost there." Potter and Weasley exchanged a wide-eyed look, then both of them turned to Draco. "Oh," Weasley mumbled. "Sorry about that." Draco scoffed. He felt as if he should scream and shout at them for being rude, and also tell them that filthy, bloodthirsty rats definitely weren't on the list of pets allowed at Hogwarts. But that would be undignified. Instead, he only gave them both a sour look before storming out of the compartment to go find some medical assistance. Draco examined the strange strip of violently pink, sticky bandage stuff a sympathetic Hufflepuff had given him as he wandered back to his own compartment. He dodged students running about the carriages. The noise of eager chatter and excited yells on the train was practically deafening as the warm lights of Hogsmeade came into view. He finally reached his compartment and was met with an odd sight. "Just stay still, would you?" Gregory was grunting from his position standing on his seat, huffing as he attempted to yank Vincent's school robe off from where he'd managed to get his head stuck on his sleeve. Came the muffled reply as Vincent thrashed wildly about. "Oh, hello, Draco," Gregory blinked as Draco closed the door. Vincent briefly froze and is squirming to wave a hand. Where have you been, then? Draco let out a big huff as he collapsed into his seat. The train was starting to slow down, the lights of Hogsmeade Station growing brighter.
Obviously nowhere important,
he finally scoffed, poking his tongue out when he saw Gregory frowning at him. He turned to the window, watching as the train drew into the station. Draco tutted. He was beginning to think that Harry Potter was rather stupid and not to mention annoying. And why of all things did he have to go and befriend a Weasley? It hadn't gone his way at all. It simply wasn't fair. A loud tearing sound fell to the compartment just as the train slowed to a stop.
"Oh, look! We're here!"
exclaimed a very breathless, red-faced Vincent Crabbe. All Draco could do was nod as he came to a very scary realization. This was actually going to be quite difficult.